Good afternoon, welcome to the UK Column News. It is the 4th of December 2014 and it's just gone 1 o'clock. Myself, Louise Collins, Brian Garish and Nick are here in Plymouth. And we have Guy Taylor in Hereford joining us very soon with the latest on Bodnam Manor and what's going on up in Hereford. Hello.
Hello. Well, we just say that all the weather reports across UK are that it's pretty cold, but it's dull, it's cloudy, it's wintry. So we thought we'd hop straight across to Malta and say that, well, we're going to thank David and Anne, who are regular viewers and
are they holidaying
listeners.
there or do they live there?
Popped over there for a little bit of a holiday, and they sent us some very nice photographs of the harbour. We'll have another one a little bit later in the news. But aside from the beautiful blue sky, blue sea, obviously fairly comfortable warm temperatures, they pointed out this, and they say for anyone contemplating visiting Malta this year, 2015, the weekly bus pass for all buses and routes has been dropped from €12 to €6.50. No wonder the buses are used and packed. What phenomenal services. You only wait about 4 to 8 minutes maximum for a bus, and they are on time. We have a lot to learn about lowering the UK price of transport. Oh, and there are night buses as well.
Oh, wow.
The Arriva buses are being phased out, and thus the drop in prices is because the Maltese government are taking over the buses.
Oh, instead of putting them out to privatisation, they're taking it back. Okay.
So we're having Malta public transport. Note the word public. Pity UK companies did not learn from these people. In addition, the Fleet Arriva buses are only 2 years old, but new buses are being introduced anyway. So there we are, sunshine, blue seas, nice temperatures, and the small island of Malta can run its buses to the entire satisfaction of the public because they've put a stop to profits and global companies.
Okay. Joined by Guy Taylor now. If you remember, Guy earlier in the week was supporting Mr Ebert, so we'll get a little bit of an update on that in a moment. And he's also been at court yesterday, I believe, over Bodnam Manor. So afternoon, Guy.
Good afternoon.
Nick, can you turn it up a little bit, or is it my earphones? Okay, so what's been happening at Bodnam? You're at court yesterday?
Yeah, I was in court yesterday. Back in September, I got the court to issue an unless order, which meant that the CPS had to provide certain documentation for a certain date, otherwise the case would get kicked out. And documentation was quite straightforward, and it was 6 documents, so I know that the other side haven't got. So anyway, the date was on the 7th of November eventually, and that date come and went, and they hadn't provided the documents. But on the 10th, 7th was a Friday, but on the 10th I'd received a great bundle, like a telephone directory through the court. But of course it didn't have any of the documents that they were supposed to provide. It actually just had documents of obfuscation, you know, statements, council tax bills. Absolutely meaningless. So I went to court yesterday to get the thing kicked out based on that and the fact that it was an abusive process. So I went there yesterday and had a few other people turned up with me. The courtroom was full of porters and things, so I don't know whether they'd had a heads up or what's going to happen. But ultimately, the judge wouldn't boot it out. He hadn't looked at the file. He said you were provided with something, even though it was out of time. And I said, well, it's an abusive process because, I mean, it used to be called barratry, or it's now called strategic lawsuit against public participation, whereby the prosecution charge you with things knowing that you're not going to be found guilty. In fact, they won't even carry on with it in most cases. It's just to keep you out of the way or to back you off for a bit. So anyway, I was very fortunate that John Hurst came and helped me, and John and his wife came and helped me. And John, you know, John's wonderful when he comes and gets his stuff together. And so we've made an application under Section 97 of the Magistrates' Court Act 1980, because in this matter there's a judge who won't give CPS or the police any of my civil court documents. And the reason he won't do that is either because they don't exist, or because he knows that we know if we get our hands on them, we can expose them as being fraudulent, that they were operating in a private capacity. So what basically this Section 97 Magistrates Court Act is, we're going to be subpoenaing the judge to appear at the case and explain his position. And the Attorney General's guidelines on it of failing to comply is perverting the course of justice and is worthy of 5 years in prison. So John said that applies to the police, so it should apply to this judge as well. So we'll see what happens on the 14th. I did threaten to arrest the prosecutor, but it all went a bit funny. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're trying to prosecute me for a summary offence, which means it's only a magistrate's court offence, for trespassing my own property. They haven't got any evidence to support any merit in their position of ownership. And inside the bundle they've given me is obvious fraud, breach of the County Courts Act, using documents purporting for them to come from a county court, land registry fraud because they've changed the names on the documents without any consent from me. And so they're all indictable offences. They're very serious offences. And yet they continue to try and prosecute me in a matter which they know is not going to go anywhere. So I said I was going to arrest the prosecutor hearing, and they said, well, where are you going to take them? So I said, no, we'll worry about it later.
Go on.
So how has it actually been left then? What's the actual result at the end of the day?
Well, I mean, they're trying to organise a trial for February, and that's where they've been going for a long time. And I said, listen, I'm not going to be hanging around on bail for all. I don't know if you remember last year at this time I was on bail for another fake offence against British Gas. And the year before I was on that, because I was on that for 2 years. And ultimately when it got to trial, just before the jury came out, the prosecution pulled their head in and said we removed the charge. And I won costs against them. Well, they're doing exactly the same game now. It's just a strategic game where they try and keep you hanging on as long as possible, interfere with your life, and then ultimately, knowing they haven't got any evidence against you, remove the charge. So I've told them that I want their professional indemnity details. Now this is very interesting because they believe they're Crown officers are immune from actions against them. Of course, we know this is nonsense, and you can't be given a license to kill. James Bond doesn't really exist, Technically, we're all responsible for our actions if they're criminal actions. So if they're engaging in crimes, you have to be indemnified if you operate on the seas of commerce. All lawyers are indemnified, and otherwise they wouldn't be able to operate. So, again, that's getting interesting. On the 14th is going to be it's going to be amazing, really, because we've got a civil court judge, a QC, who's holding on or refusing to give the police and the CPS any documentation which they need for prosecution against me. So we're going to actually ask for him to be subpoenaed to court in the matter, and probably a rare occasion for it.
You've made the Hereford Times, I see.
Yeah, which is unusual because they do appear now and again, and when they do appear, they usually support me quite well. But on this occasion, of course, they've made the most out of the fact that I was threatening the rest of the CPS if they use fraudulent documents against me. And obviously, if they're going to use fraudulent documents to try and prosecute me for a crime they know hasn't been committed because I can't be trespassing in my own property, then I'm going to arrest them. I said, if someone breaks the law in front of me, then I'm obligated to arrest them, and I will. So I think for the next hearing on the 14th of January, when we make the application for the judge, then we'll probably call the police beforehand, and let them do the job because they can do it a lot tighter than I can. But I will be able to expose that the law is being broken in these and the documents they're using in there have already been established as fraudulent, and they've been established as fraudulent because I got a private prosecution against the bailiff for using the fraudulent document. So now they're trying to legitimise that document in this action. So it's fairly complex, but it's simple really when you know the facts. It's just it's a bit like learning to play chess in your own particular matter, and I know the game on this, so it's not hard for me and on this matter. So we'll see where we go with them. John's looking forward to it, and so am I. So
how's Linda getting on? Is she okay?
Yeah, Linda's fine. Yeah,
And what about when do you think any time any timelines do you think that you when you maybe get back into Bodnam?
Well, my bottom line is this: let's see if do they really want to go for a trial where there's a judge has to give evidence and state that basically my files don't exist, because that would be in February if it.
Right.
And I've already, the court staff there have already confessed that there's nothing in my files. And I've made application under their own rules under CPR 5.42, which means they're supposed to give me the files in 48 hours, and they won't give me them. So we know that there's nothing there. If they want to go forward with a trial, then it will be very interesting in February. But I mean, let's wait and see. At the moment the thing gets removed, then I'm obviously going to be going back to Bodnam.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just quickly, what about Mr. Eberts? There wasn't a good a turnout as you were hoping, was there?
Well, no. I mean, in all honesty, I was on my way up to London for a meeting with Mr. Ebert when I got the call like 2 hours before that. He had the door smashed in and these bailiffs had turned up and carried him out of the place. When we got there, of course, quite a few good people did turn up, and they blocked the bailiff's van in there. We had masses of police coming backwards and forwards, filming us. I was communicating with their supervisor. They're basically, we know nothing. I was showing them straightforward that the document that was being used not only was a forgery, but it was the wrong document. If it had been the correct document, if you know what I mean, because they were using the wrong writ. Yeah, when bailiffs come to your door to remove you, the first thing they come around with is a thing called a writ 66, which enables them. They're supposed to knock the door, ask for your consent. Are you going to hand the keys over? And if you say no, they then go back, take the writ 66 back to court, say they weren't able to get consensual possession. They're then granted a writ 69, which enables them for assistance on that to go back. And of course, they don't even know about their own forms. They're printing them off on their own printer. And they think, because it says they're commanded to go there, they think that means they're commanded to drag people out, So the whole thing is a farce. Unfortunately, Mr. Ebert and his family came down and everything else, and it was riotous in the end. But I had to leave because I had to go back to Hereford. Tom Crawford and Salon and that stayed on. My understanding is Mr. Ebert's at the moment he's gone abroad to stay with his sister, only for a couple of days because he wants to come back and carry on the fight. And we'll pursue it. I mean, we have got the Metropolitan Police. The Metropolitan Police officers that were dealing with the fraudulent documents with us, as we suspected, they got pulled. Someone higher up the food chain, some common purpose Mason, I pulled them off it. So the lower level officers were told they aren't to ask questions about the documents, and in fact, even documents that are purporting to be court documents, they're not to question them. So. The fight goes on, and I mean, onwards and upwards, and a Jaffa cake for the general. It's getting very interesting, very interesting.
Guy, thank you very much for an excellent update. I think you're right. It's coming to the surface bit by bit. The truth about what the reality is of Britain in 2014 is coming to the surface, and people have got to see it. People in large numbers have got to see and realise that this massive fraud and corruption is real before we start to be able to deal with it. So I don't know whether you're able to sort of stay and watch as we do the rest of the news today, but you might just be interested just to see where we go now. Probably this MP, Mr. Garnier, is not working in your best interest. So a Sun headline here, which is pretty straightforward: senior Tory MP sneers at what he calls dog-end voters. And he was speaking at an Institute of Economic Affairs, debating taxes on the rich. And the 51-year-old MP for Wyre Forest said businessmen were being put off by governments hiking their taxes to appeal to poorer voters. And apparently he added, we need to be giving a much clearer message to them that they won't have to worry about politicians mucking around with tax rates in order to try and attract a few sort of dog-end voters in the outlying regions of the country. So this is the massive arrogance and hypocrisy. This man is not looking into corruption in courts. He's not looking into paedophile rings in high places. He's keeping things going. And of course, he's surrounded by many others. So we've got plebgate Andrew Mitchell. He of course, just unbelievably arrogant and rude to the police. We've got ex-cabinet minister David Mellor, who was outrageously rude to a taxi driver in London. And this lady, Emily Thornberry MP, she was the one who made the comments about white vans and flags. So if we really want to understand why we're not at the moment getting any progress, getting the lid off corruption amongst the police, judiciary, Westminster and courts, I believe that arrogance is a key part of it.
Absolutely.
Anybody who's listening or watching and would happen to be in Mr. Gharney's constituency, perhaps they might like to take him on with a few letters and bits and pieces. And that would lead us nicely on to David Our King Cameron. My goodness, I'm not supposed to say that because, of course, David has reserved the David Our King Cameron title to himself, following Kim. You're right there.
Yeah, it's the
Louise.
dust, I think, and the lights.
I
And
can't
everything.
believe that we'd operate from a dusty studio. So we've got David Cameron, who's apparently followed Kim Jong-un from North Korea in saying, "You can't steal my name." What's at the back of David Cameron? Well, of course, at the back of David Cameron are some very powerful people, very wealthy. So the Mirror pointing out here that Tories have been handed 3 million. This is a story going back to August, but we thought we'd bring it to the fore again. So Mr. Cameron received a mere $500,000 in donations, with another 200,000 going to his constituency association in Witney, Oxford. So big money keeping David Cameron and the Tories in power. George Osborne, who seemed to be barely conscious in Westminster the other day, looked as though he'd had a particularly hard night drinking or taking some substance. He declared 330,000 in personal donations, with another 330 for his Cheshire Constituency Association. So somebody in the background paying to keep these despicable Tory politicians in power. The biggest winner, Boris Johnson, tipped for Leadership Challenge, well, declared donations of almost 600,000. And we remember that Boris Johnson, of course, simply wants to not only run the police in London, he's doing that, he wants to take over the courts. So is it Boris Johnson taking over the courts, or is it the financial backers that presumably own him and his little moppy hair?
Yeah, I think so.
So massive corruption in UK, and I think you were going to follow it through here, Louise, with global scale.
Yeah, so The Independent have published the Global Corruption Index, and Britain has come in at number 14 of the least corrupt countries in the world. The index has been produced by Transparency International, which, according to its website, is a non-government organisation. But from what I can see, it is very much involved with government funding. So here is the list. So the least corrupt countries in the world, at the top there it's Denmark, followed closely by New Zealand, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Switzerland, Singapore, Netherlands, and the list goes on. There we are down at 14th. And the most corrupt country as well, topping it, is Cambodia. And we've got Zimbabwe in there, Syria, the Yemen, Libya, and the list goes on. But the full list is in The Independent, so if people want to go and have a little look. So we're not very corrupt here.
Well, who compiled the list? Did anybody?
Well, that's what we're going to go and have a look at now.
Was it a corrupt organisation?
I think it could be a corrupt little organisation. Here they are. So they're Transparency International. And there they all are. They've got offices all over the world. And here's their vision. If we can go to the next slide, Brian. Okay, so their vision is a world in which government, politics, business, civil society and daily lives of people are free of corruption. Yeah, right.
Just the logo's a little bit
exactly
of an eye. So
okay, and so here we go. There's the funding. Transparency International receives funding from a range of donors, including government agencies, multilateral
institutions,
private sector and individuals. So got nothing to do with government, but they'll take their money anyway. So this has come from them, offices all over the place.
So Trust Transparency International, which is funded by the government agencies
but has nothing
and
to do with
foundations,
government.
but has nothing to do, is independent,
Yeah.
and they've decided that corruption in UK is relatively low.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to continue to challenge that, because we think corruption in UK, and particularly in this present combined Conservative Lib Dem government, is pretty outrageous, and of course Labour in the background. Right, well, of course you wouldn't find corruption in the European Union at all.
This is just shocking. Okay, former EU President Herman Van Rompuy is getting a transitional allowance of £600,000 over the next year to assist him back into everyday life after his term in Brussels. The poor man, it must be so petrifying leaving Brussels and getting into the outside world.
It is, because, yeah, scary place, the real world. So £600,000 to
just to ease him back into the world. He's going to be paid £133,723 a year until December 2017. He will also receive EU pension worth £52,000. And on top of that, he's also going to get a £21,000 one-time payoff as well. There are other MEPs and getting a lot of cash for doing nothing. And here we have the beautiful Baroness Ashton, who finished her job as EU Commissioner of Foreign Affairs, and she also received the same sum, £133,723, as easing her back in, but she doesn't get a pension.
Yeah, that's wasn't she the lady that was going to start an investigation to who the snipers were that started or were in the early days of the violence in Ukraine?
Yes.
I think she was the lady who said, well, yes, we'll look into that, but she doesn't seem to have looked into that.
No.
Could that be why they've given her a nice big pension, because she slid that into the long run?
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure, we can't say there's corruption in the European Union. We only have to say, of course, that they still have produced no full signed-off audited accounts. And David Cameron and, of course, the Labour governments have been giving the EU taxpayers money, malfeasance in public office, which is a criminal offence. But presumably we're going to need Guy to clean the courts up before we can get them into a decent court. So anyway, George Osborne, clearly a clean man when he's actually awake and washed and shaven. And
together.
Which is not often.
Okay, so there's going to be a lot more on the autumn statement with Mike tomorrow, but I just wanted to just see he was getting rather upset by the BBC. He slammed them and accused them of hyperbolic coverage of his autumn statement. He claims the BBC had unfairly represented the government programme of cuts and accusing reporters of producing a negative coverage. And as I say, Mike's going to go into this a lot more, but he really wasn't happy with the old BBC. Bless him.
Just think about that a bit. It says snippy Chancellor loses temper with broadcaster over reporting on spending cuts. I'm not sure what the snippy refers to.
Trippy, maybe?
Smoky, possibly?
Trippy?
I don't know. We'll think about that one. But on the subject of the BBC, let's bring your attention back to UK column analysis of the complex monster that the BBC has become. And remember that the public broadcasting arrangement part of the BBC, a budget of £3.656 billion, that's just under UK column revenues. And of course then alongside this we've got all of the commercial arms. So we've got BBC Worldwide with 1.1 billion of sales. We've got BBC Global News Limited, 91 million. BBC Studios and Post-Production, 37 million in sales. And then it got really interested when we started to see organisations like BBC Monitoring that were Foreign and Commonwealth Office funded. But when we did our investigative report into the BBC, we did point out here, note that BBC Monitoring is to be funded by the licence fee payers from 2013-14. Now, thank you very much to the viewer that said, are you aware of this lot going on? And what we've now got is BBC Arabic. If you want a translation of the page, you can use Google's translator. So you can find out that some of their headlines are to do with threatening to kill an American hostage in a video of Al-Qaeda in Yemen. So the BBC promoting, of course, all of the terrorism and ramping up everything about Al-Qaeda. Now, we've cheated slightly because we've gone to Wikipedia just for a little overview on this. We're going to have a look at this in more detail. But nevertheless, there's some quite interesting information here. So BBC Arabic Television is run by the BBC World Service, initially funded grant in aid from the British Foreign Office, but in 2014 funding was switched to come from, oh yes, the licence fee payer. So you're paying your TV licence on the basis that that's for programming provided to you sitting at home in Britain. Well, that's not what the BBC wants to do because they're operating their overseas propaganda channels, but they're going to do it with your money. And if we go on here, it says William Hague said that that BBC Arabic service would continue the BBC's valuable work in the region. Obviously, he was making that comment while he was Foreign Secretary. But William Hague was very keen that the BBC was able to pump its propaganda out into the Middle East and the Arabic world. And then if we get on to the meat of the finances, the annual budget of 15 million was funded by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, but that's been passed over to the taxpayers. And even Wikipedia picked up that the BBC says it remains editorially independent, right? But some of the Iranian media have accused the British government of using the service as a propaganda tool. And the Iranian government issued a statement denouncing the news service as suspicious and illegal and working against the interests of the Islamic Republic. I think we'd say, UK column, well, we're going to stick with the Iranian view on this, but they're wrong. It's not just against the interests of the Islamic Republic, of course, it's against the interests of the British licence payer and the British nation state. So
I wonder how many people are actually paying their TV licence.
Well, I think an increasing number are not paying. You've only got to have a look at YouTube to see more and more video clips of people simply turning away the licence fee collectors. Licence fee goons is the overview of the cluster of videos.
Guy, are you paying your TV licence?
No, certainly not. No, certainly not under no circumstances.
Good for you. Thank you.
Okay, so here we are. We'll just bring you up on this one, which is a reminder of what the BBC's up to. And this was the BBC promoting that the Quran should be featuring in the next coronation. And they went on to say that the former Bishop of Oxford, Lord Herries of Pentegarth, sounds like something out of Harry Potter, that. I can't read it properly because it's a bit small. But here is this being promoted by the BBC. So the BBC using licence payers' money for an Arabic service. And our comment is focused on the BBC, what the BBC is doing here. And, of course, it's now also promoting that the Quran should feature in the next coronation. So we'll leave you to think about where that is taking us on behalf of the licence fee payer. Meanwhile, back to the subject of corruption, and it was suggested that we should remind people that a few weeks ago the London Evening Standard came up with this story, which was a 67-year-old man was arrested in Dorset and questioned at a local police station. He was later released on bail. But this was an arrest as part of Operation Brancaster, which was one strand that officers assessed after MP Tom Watson claimed there was a paedophile ring to number 10. So these stories, all there in the background. We're still not seeing any announcement of the arrest or impending trials of senior people in government. But the Daily Mail, with a major article with a lot of detail, the full horrifying truth about Sir Nicholas Fairbairn, the other paedophile at Margaret Thatcher's side.
And this one's dead as well.
So this is all historic.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it's starting to say, well, this was going on. We will say, well, of course, it still is going on.
Well, it is going on, and people are still alive, and these people need to be brought to justice.
Indeed.
Instead of keep focusing on all the ones who've popped it, it's no good.
Well, this is true. So we just pop that one back on screen, Nick, if you will. Let's remind ourselves that all these people go to the palace for their gongs. Jimmy Savile was another key one. We've got this lady mentioned, and a picture of her in the paper. She said that she was abused as a very young girl. Sir Nicholas was a close friend of Susie's late father, Robert Henderson, a fellow leading light of the Scottish legal establishment, who regularly held decadent private parties at his family's large and smartly decorated Edinburgh townhouse. She said she was maybe 4 years old. She had a skirt on, and Nicholas and my dad had been drinking, and my dad told me to sit on Nicholas's knee, and he put his hand up her skirt and abused her. My dad just stood there laughing. And last month, Nicholas was named as one of the 3 MPs on a list of clients of the notorious Elm Guest House, a gay brothel in Barnes, West London, where underage boys from a nearby care home were allegedly plied with drink and drugs and sexually abused. And now, of course, we're talking about murder in connection with that as well. But as we
And
have
Buckingham Palace, and
Indeed.
Balmoral.
Indeed.
Bill Maloney will be on the show with me next week. He was going to come today, but we're not doing a show. But Bill's going to go into it a lot more on what's going on.
Talk about what he knows, and of course we know that many of the London police in particular are very annoyed at the constant close down of these investigations. We're just going to say it's interesting, of course, connections from north of the border, and let's remind ourselves that there's a distinct reluctance to carry out a full-scale child abuse inquiry north of the border. Alex Salmon and Kenny McCaskill seem to be in a hurry to move away from their positions. And we just point out, of course, that Robert Greene remains under house arrest, awaiting trial in January 2015, because he's been a very naughty boy and tried to protect children from abusers. So there we are, north of the border, and more going on south of the border as well.
Yeah, Martin Kimber, who resigned from his job as Chief Executive of Rotherham Council after the child abuse scandal, has received £26,666 from the council for doing absolutely nothing. Mr. Kimber was supposed to work his notice until the end of the year, but ended up finishing his job on October the 31st so the new chap could settle in. But apparently the sum that he would have, this 26,666 would have been the total amount that he would received if he had worked his notice. But he's just been sitting at home and raking in the cash after his council have been found to have known about the child abuse going on in that area.
And we'll add that while he's getting the money, we're being informed that legal teams are busy trying to work both sides of the fence. What I mean by that is that they are looking to take legal aid in order to represent child abuse victims. Then, with the other hand, they're saying, well, we're going to have 25% of any compensation paid to you. So some very interesting things coming to light about the actions of legal firms across the country. And, of course, what we're seeing is in a small number of legal company law firms are hoovering up many of the victims, and they're obviously then raking in the money. So if we take Nottingham, for example, where the average payout by Nottingham City County Council was £9,000, we don't know yet, but we're going to see whether this is the case. It would appear quite likely that a cut of that has been taken by the law firms concerned.
I wonder what Guy's comments on these law firms is. Guy, what are your thoughts, considering what you're dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're dealing with really is these people think we owe them a living. You know, they go to college or university and they come out with law degrees, and then they seem to think that the public have got to pay them these ridiculous figures. And that wouldn't be so bad if they were doing the job they're supposed to do, but they're not operating to the prescribed form, as myself and lots of self-litigants are finding out, when we're going through the detail. And I think they've had it their own way for a long, long time, and it's very hard to get off the gravy train. And, unfortunately for them, the self-litigants in this country are waking up and we're sharing information, and we're finding day by day that they don't cross the T's, they don't dot the I's. Why they think they're worth this money, God only knows.
Yeah.
Thanks, Guy.
Okay.
So staying with Rotherham now, the former mayor, Barry Dodson, has today been charged with indecent assault of a teenager. The alleged offence happened in 1987. Mr Dodson has been released on bail and will appear at Sheffield Magistrates Court on the 18th of December. Now, I think this is pretty incredible. Melanie reports child abuse and ends up going into prison without bail. And this gentleman...
Yeah, well, it's laughable
Amazing.
in a sick sense.
I know,
isn't it?
I'm not. Yeah, it's sick. There you go.
Right, let me just skip over this one a minute. We seem to have... where's the lady? Here she is.
Oh, the beautiful
I just couldn't
woman.
resist bringing this lady back on screen. Theresa May, we're going to keep saying it. She was on TV, and what she's saying, well, she just can't understand how abuse could have been covered up. The fact that people are gently moved out of their jobs, they're paid, the victims aren't supported and allowed to bring their abuse through the criminal courts. So here we are, she's supposed to be an intelligent Tory politician, Home Secretary, but she can't quite understand. Meanwhile, Robert's still there at home, and Melanie Shaw due for sentencing on the 11th, which I think is Tuesday next week. And so we wait and see what's going to happen. Possibly Melanie could be sent back into Sodexo Prison, Peterborough. Let's remember she's already had 3 months in a vicious prison. What's her crime? She's a victim. All the stuff that she's been through, the way her life has been as the result of the fact that she's been a victim. Theresa May, she just can't understand. It's
Amazing.
Incredible, isn't it? Well, what's coming on the back of these people? We get a hint from The Guardian. And we're going to thank Alex for sending us through this one. But essentially, it's a Guardian article that I recommend you read. No wonder landowners are scared. We're starting to learn who owns Britain. Scotland is breaking the cover-up that stifles our political thought. Bring the Highland Spring south. Bring the Highland Spring south. So he's saying, bring out the violins. The land reform programme announced last week by the Scottish Government is the end of civilised life on earth, if you believe the corporate press. In a country where 432 people own half the private rural land, all change is Stalinism. Now, what's interesting is he then begins to talk about what's going on, and he quickly says, let's talk about real money. The Westminster government claims to champion entrepreneurial society of wealth creators, but the real rewards and incentives are for rent. So he talks about the majesty of the state protecting a patrimonial class. A looped and windowed democratic cloak barely covers the corrupt old body of the nation. So it all sounds good. He goes back to the fact that peaceful protesters can be arrested under the 1361 Justices of the Peace Act. He talks about the Royal Mines Act of 1424, which apparently gives the Crown the right to all the gold and silver in Scotland. But he also mentions the remembrancer of the City of London sitting behind the Speaker's chair in the House of Commons to protect the entitlement of a corporation that predates the Norman conquest. This is essentially a feudal nation. So interesting that the remembrance gets a mention, because we hadn't really heard about this till UK Column started to report that, gentlemen. But the comment by the person who highlighted this to us is the key bit. A revealing piece by Agenda 21's apostle in the Cotswold that explicitly calls the SNP's Land Confiscation Enabling Act a spring from which English and Welsh common law property rights can be eroded by inspiration and precedence, whether or not a formal end comes to the Union. So the person who sent this through to us, very much warning, don't be taken in by what the Guardian's putting out here. They are putting a base of all the right sounding things, but what they're actually doing now is another attack on common law south of the border, and as he said, to attack common law property rights. Have a read of that article, and you can make your own mind up, of course. But more is going on in the background, and here is yet again a focus on the fact that apparently we need a new Magna Carta. So there's going to be a talk on this subject in Conway Hall, 4th of December at 6 o'clock. New Magna Carta, time for a written constitution. Here's the lie in the sales blurb that we don't have a written constitution. Well, of course we do. And what sort of person gets involved with this? Well, let's meet Graham Allen, MP. He just happens to be one of the Nottingham MPs, saying here, now is not the time to cut frontline support in Nottingham and punish those who need our help. So we'll just drop in there, fascinating that, of course, Melanie Shaw was absolutely punished by the system. She didn't get help and support as a child abuse victim. Mr. Allen, she got banged up in a vicious profit-making prison. So what's going on here? Well, it's this. The Political and Constitutional Reform Committee. This is where Nick Clegg is a very dangerous grey man working in the background to get people to think that we need massive constitutional change. If you want to check for your MP on the list of members, here they are. You can go to that website yourself. So we've got attacks on common law property rights. We've got criminal courts. We're now going for the attack on the Constitution. What more do we need? Well, of course, we need to get rid of any sort of true spirituality. So here's the Mirror pointing out that this flaccid army officer is saying that Christianity has no place in the British Army. So what's going on here? Should be able to bring in a bit. The devil's playing around. So let's remind ourselves that the British government thinks that if we're going to have a look at religions, then we need to get Satanism into the military. And the Telegraph article here was the one saying that a devil-worshipping non-commissioned officer in the Royal Navy has become the first registered Satanist in British armed forces. So he was serving on the Type 22 frigate Cumberland. He's been officially recognised as a Satanist by the ship's captain, and MOD has approved this. This allows him to perform satanic rituals aboard and permits him to have a funeral carried out by the Church of Satan. So there's the picture of Anton LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan. And leading hand Kramer is now lobbying the Ministry of Defence to make Satanism a registered religion in the armed forces so that Satanists can join up without fear of marginalisation and the necessity to put up with Christian dogma. So presumably the next thing we're going to see on board British warships is probably a little bit of child abuse and sacrifice at the same time. And if you think I'm joking, well, am I? Because clearly the British government thinks this is the sort of behaviour to bring on board warships. Picture of HMS Bulwark and an escort in Valletta, Malta, and that was the joining of the Sunshine we had at the beginning of the programme. So who says that Satanism is important? Never mind the people who actually believe it for themselves. The British government believes that Satanism is not only something that people need to be involved with, they're encouraging it within British Armed Forces.
Well, they're promoting it and giving out a satanic Bible over in America, Pennsylvania, I think it is, and they've got a big statue put up in the town square.
So this is not an accident.
No.
And if that's where the state is going, we shouldn't be surprised at this headline from the Plymouth Herald. It says, new ASBO laws have been used to turf a troublesome Plymouth woman out of her home. So the cops are crowing that they've taken advantage of the ASBO laws to evict a nuisance neighbour from a property in West Park. and they've warned many more could follow suit, thanks to the 2014 powers which make turfing out, note the soft expression, turfing out troublesome tenants easier than before. And so here's PC Dan Penn-Collins. He headed up the eviction, and he said that previously police would have to prove a raft of conditions before the court would grant an eviction. Well, all of that's been solved. The old legislation was difficult. You had to prove it was being used for misuse of drugs. But now, where are we? Here we are. The police would have to prove that the property was being used for disorderly or criminal behaviour and was causing a serious nuisance. So he's really happy because it's now easier for the police to turf people out. And let's join the dots. Here's Plymouth Community Homes that owned that lady's house. This was originally the council housing stock of Plymouth, slid sideways into a profit-making company where they say what the rules are in your own house. And of course, you bring over the staff from the council as well. So this is a gentleman called Clive Turner. He's now chief executive of Plymouth Community Homes. But he says, in this instance, going to court to remove a tenant from their home is always a last resort for us and a measure we didn't take lightly. But we've turf this lady out, and that's the problem solved.
Yeah, we're going to go home and sit in front of the fire and on a nice comfy sofa.
Yeah, and Clive was working for Plymouth City Council, I believe, and then it has also gently slid across on a nice salary where he can remove people from their homes. Or put them in prison, maybe.
Maybe. A third man has been found dead at Kent Prison, bringing the number up to 9 in 2014. HM Prison Elmley in Kent, I went to check because I thought it may have been a Sodexo prison, but it isn't, has been at the centre of an investigation over deaths in custody. A report that was produced in June said the prison was very overcrowded as it was only built to hold 985 inmates, but it's currently running at holding 1,252. So total chaos within the prisons.
But they're making a profit, which is the most important thing.
Yes, indeed.
We'll just end on this note, which is that apparently UKIP has fallen foul of, Conservative Friends of Israel or the Jewish Chronicle, more explicitly, because they don't think it's appropriate that UKIP Friends of Israel should have a logo, which we think is to do with the pound sign. So we're just going to say there, once again, we have British political parties with particular friendships with overseas political organisations. What is it that stops these political parties from simply representing the people of Britain? There we are.
That's it. Okay, so bumper stickers, leaflets, and obviously, leaflets and T-shirts are all on the website. And please email carol@ukcolumn.org, and please tell your friends to come and join us at the ukcolumn.org and subscribe, because that keeps us doing what we're doing without you guys. So please, anyone you know who hasn't heard of the UK Column, get them subscribing and supporting us. It'd be great.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Be Mike Robinson and myself tomorrow, 1 o'clock. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.